There are over 2,000 cases of domestic violence reported in Malta just last year.
If we can today save one woman and her children and her parents and her siblings from this, then it's worth being here.
Why are you hitting mommy? It's her birthday.
You're very careful and walking on eggshells and being careful not to say the wrong thing, not to do the wrong thing.
Now I can cry. Welcome to the She Word, conversations that women rarely have, but really should. And this is one show I really wish we didn't have to do. I really wish we didn't have to discuss this topic. But the truth is that there are over 2,000 cases of domestic violence reported in Malta just last year, over a 20% increase from 2020. In Malta, 2022, 3,100 individuals made use of the different services available to those experiencing domestic violence. Here in Malta, 1 in 3 women are affected by intimate partner violence. That means if it's not you, it's someone that you know or it's someone that you care about. Domestic abuse, however, often extends beyond violence and may include mental or emotional abuse, financial control, intimidation, or online abuse. As I've said, also in America, 1 in 3 women, 35.6% of women have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And in the UK, 4.4% of people aged 16 years and over, that's 2.1 million people, experienced domestic abuse in the last year. But domestic abuse is often a hidden crime, and it's not reported to the police. Therefore, data held by the police can only provide a partial picture of the actual level of domestic abuse experienced. Many cases will not go to criminal justice and they will not be reported. So we can only assume that the statistics are much, much higher. And this is exactly why we are talking about this topic. Because if this topic affects you personally, we want to know that you've been seen. And we want to know that we're going to provide all the information we can right under the description and at the end of the show. Domestic violence always hits the headline when it becomes fatal. But the statistics are that domestic violence, domestic abuse is getting worse. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. And we as women want to see change. And we as women need to see change. I want to really thank my brave and courageous guests for joining me for this show. I am really delighted that you could be with me. This is such an important show and possibly one of the most important shows I think that we've ever done on the She Word. First of all, Elaine Compagno, thank you so much for being here. Elaine, you are the General Manager at Women for Win Foundation, which does an outstanding work amongst women, not only connecting over 50,000 women through the Facebook group, but also providing real support to women who need it. You've also been the manager at SOAR, which is a survivor-led service that works towards enabling survivors of violence in intimate relationships and domestic violence to become empowered to pick up the pieces and rebuild their lives. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to find out more about you in just a moment. Sephora Aquilina, hello, you beautiful lady. You're sitting opposite me. You look great.
Thank you.
You are an amazing inspirational influencer who we would all know by the title
Diego and us.
Diego and Us, which is beautiful. And I've seen you and followed you on Instagram for a really long time. You share your journey of your beautiful family, but you also have spoken out about domestic abuse and domestic violence as part of your journey prior to where you are now. And I want to thank you for
Thank you for having me.
about it and being here. Rachel Williams is a familiar face. Hello, Rachel.
Hello.
You are a law student, a full-time employee as a customer service specialist. You're a mum. You are an outspoken activist and counsellor in Supports Bay. And when we just started talking about the topic of domestic abuse, we had this conversation and we said whether or not you come on the show for various reasons. And then you just turned around and just said, speaking up is not going to help anyone. I'm coming on the show. And I'm really grateful that you are here. So first of all, I'm going to say, wow, you look so bright and beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm going to stay with you for a second as we come around the table. I'm going to ask, have I missed out anything about you in your description? And why is this topic so important to you and so relevant?
Like you said, too, the situation is getting worse. I wasn't aware of the exact statistics, but it's not statistics which are important right now, in the sense that they show us that something's going wrong somewhere. We need to fix the system. We need to fix people. We need education. And when we had in Malta the last victim of domestic violence, I was so angry. And what I was even angrier about was that it was a familiar story. We've heard this before. Someone sought help, an intelligent, beautiful woman, a professional, and yet nothing happened. How is this possible in this day and age that women are still subjected to this? It's not just her life, it's the people that love her, the people that are going through this possibly, and they might even be thinking, is this me next? And yeah, it's exactly the expression that you used when we were talking. If we can today save one woman and her children and her parents and her siblings from this, then it's worth being here. It's important to be here. So thank you for bringing this up, Tudi.
Absolutely. And I know that you also, it's a personal subject to you as well. And we're going to talk about that. And I just want to make it clear that there's a lot of lived experience around this table. So we're not just talking about this from a academic point of view. We're talking about this as a personal topic that's affected us all. And I'm really grateful. And you're right. If one person, I always say that, if one person is affected by this discussion, if one person can find a way out of any situation they find themselves in, no matter what we talk about, but if it just affects one person, we've done our job. That's it. We've done our job. So Sephora, tell me about you. I mean, you are just lovely. I love following you. I've been fangirling you for a really long time. And it's really great to have you here. In actual fact, the last time, this topic has been on the cards ever since we started the She Word. And last time I wanted to come and ask you, you just had a baby.
Yes.
And I said, okay, Trude, this is not a good time to contact Sephora. But you've moved on. You have this great life now. But tell me a little bit more about yourself and why this topic is important to you.
It is very important for me because it is part of me. It is my story. And I feel that it's very important that, as you said, if at least we can make a difference in someone's life, it's everything. So for me, it's very important that we speak about the subject, even more because I think that this subject remains a taboo. Not everyone is comfortable to reach out for help. There's a sense of shame, which I totally understand because I've been there. Something you feel ashamed talking about even with your closest friends or with your family. Because I used to feel like a failure. So it's very important to speak about it and to normalize the subject, that it's okay to speak about it.
And we'll talk about that shame because it's one of the barriers to moving forward. And I'm so glad that you're here. But again, I mean, when we sat down and I said that 1 in 3 women in Malta is affected by this, that means if it's not you, I mean, the statistics are there's 4 of us at the table. We've all been affected by this in one way or another. But if it's not you, you definitely know someone. And I hate the thought that there's somebody in your life that is going through this, and it's because of shame, it's hidden, you might not see it. And we're going to talk about that as well. But thank you so much for being here. Elaine, tell me about your journey, because this is a topic that you have had a great deal of passion for over a very long time.
Yes. I have been through it myself. I'm quite outspoken about that. It was 2008 when I managed to escape. And then obviously I went through the whole system, the legal system, and the experience of that was atrocious. And I decided, so previously my profession was a hairstylist, and I decided that I needed to do something with my experience to make it have been useful, to make it have been for a reason, to bring something good out of something absolutely terrible. And I thought my experience of having gone through the system might help someone else. And so I got together with a number of women, and together we set up a service under the auspices of St. Jean-Attide Foundation. That was back in 2012. And the reason we did that was mostly two reasons. One, because we knew that survivors of domestic violence had expertise. They're experts by their experience, and so they have something to offer other women who may feel not quite understood by someone who hasn't experienced it. You do get empathy from professionals, and there's nothing beats academia. But when you've been through something, you know how it feels, you know what it sounds like, you know the triggers, what they are. And so having survivors trained to be able to support other women who are going through it or have been through it, I thought was definitely a gap we needed to fill. And apart from that, and more importantly, I feel, is that wherever policy was being drawn up, survivors were not at the table. So it was about us, without us. And so the reason why I wanted to get involved was to make sure that survivors had a voice right there at the table. So someone's listening to us, and not just making a policy, not just creating a procedure on how one does this or the other, or how, what a victim must go through, and she reports, and then, the standard operating procedures of whatever it is she is trying to get help from, whether it's the police, whether it's the court. So we decided that it was important that survivors were there to say, hey, you know what? Actually, sitting in the waiting room at court with the person I fear the most, with the guy who's tried to kill me, is not such a great idea before I need to go into court and give evidence. That's going to really make me anxious, and I might faint, and I might forget what I wanted to say, because that's not the best situation to be in. You need to give evidence, and it's important you get it right, and it's important you get it chronologically. Having the one person you fear the most just a few feet from
intimidated.
you. Yeah. Simple things like this. Using video conferencing in court. So many. We did, this is back in 2015, we did a whole conference about it, I remember, where we had 38 recommendations for policymakers. And a few had been taken up, but most of them are still just lying there gathering dust. And we still see it, like in the recent event, sadly. I recognize completely what it feels like to go to a police station or to go somewhere to get help, and that's dismissed, the way you are dismissed as, you're making a storm in a teacup. Seriously, this isn't so bad, come back when it's worse. We totally get it.
I am so utterly thrilled that you're at this table.
Thank you.
And I'm so utterly thrilled that you're a woman making change. And I'm really glad that we're having this discussion.
What if you could start your journey over? Start here and start again there. That's how life works, in a circular way. We understand the importance of circles, and that's why you are at the heart of ours. Find your way to wellness with Browns.
Whether for a moment of disconnection, a complete body-mind reset, or a bonding time together, book online stress-free at Myoka.com. Complimentary spa facilities on every visit.
Something about the way you bounce makes me want to keep you around
I want to start off by saying, look, we tend to sit up and take note of this topic when somebody loses their life through domestic violence, and it's happened very recently. But as we've all said around the table, this is not new. This has been going on for, well, essentially millennia. But here in the news very recently, it's been happening over and over again. I want to just ask, I mean, we talk about domestic violence, but I want to just ask you, and probably Elaine is a great place to start. There are other elements that are involved in domestic violence. There is, I mentioned, the coercive control, emotional abuse, online or digital abuse, economic and financial abuse, all of these things that are happening. There are a lot of terms that are used. We also just started off talking about intimate partner violence. So what's the difference between domestic violence, domestic abuse, and intimate partner violence?
I think all abuse is violent, and we need to move away from thinking abuse is a softer kind of violence. It's not. All abuse is violent. It doesn't need to be physically violent, because if I slammed my hand on the table, I'm not hitting anyone, but I can tell you with 4 survivors around the table, we're all going to jump. And that, it impacts you on the inside. It plays tricks on your mind, because it takes you back to when it's happened. So even now, if someone was abusive with me, right, and even if you just slammed your hand on the table, it's going to impact me in that way. Even though you wouldn't be raising a hand on me if you had to slam the table. So there are many ways in which you can be violent towards someone. And so that's abuse and violence. The difference between domestic violence and intimate partner violence is that intimate partner violence is very specific. It is violence towards someone you're intimate with. And if it's domestic violence, it's a bit more of an umbrella term for violence that can happen between siblings, mother to child, child to parent, or not necessarily a mother, but grandparents. So it's usually people in the family, people even who are living in the same place. You could be flatmates. If you're sharing a place, if you're sharing the home, and there is violence, that's also domestic violence, because it's violence between people you should feel safe with, right? People who are close to you, people you should trust.
Home should be the place where you open the door and it's like, oh, thank God I'm home. To me, I wanted to escape. I never wanted to be home. I hated the weekends. I hated public holidays. I hated Saturdays, because Saturday morning I would be told, it's Saturday night, you have to perform your duties.
That's a type of violence we didn't mention, the sexual violence, which is very underestimated, even by women who go through it. I have listened to over 400 disclosures from women telling me about their story, about what they've been through. One thing I notice is that a lot of the stories are very similar. Sometimes I get confused because it's so, like, even the words, if we had to share between us what we've been told, we would have been told the same exact thing. So it's very similar and also very unique. But you start to see that, in my case, I had to go out and ask, were you ever forced, or did you ever feel forced to engage in a sexual activity because you knew that there were consequences if you didn't? So even though you're saying yes, even though you're there and it looks like there's consent, it's coerced.
It's not consent
coerced
at all.
Because you just know that if you say no, if you put your foot down and say, listen, I really don't feel like this. And after all, who wants to have sex with someone who's just beaten them, with someone who's being nasty to them, with someone who clearly doesn't have their well-being at heart? Yeah.
Or they've come back from their girlfriends.
Now I'm listening to her words, and I am remembering that this week I had a conversation with my partner, and I was talking to him about my previous relationship. And now I'm hearing you and I'm saying this is the first form of abuse that I ever experienced, because the first time I had sex in my life with my ex, my ex, he talked me into it, and there was a hint of a threat there. Listen, if you're not gonna sleep with me, it's been 2 months we've been dating. I wasn't ready. And now, so I'm making the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
And I'm saying
Yeah.
Strad's the
Don't
first
think.
form of abuse that I experienced.
It's so subtle, isn't it? You're not aware. You think it can't happen to you. And you're not aware it's happening.
Well, can I tell you, because this leads me on to my next question. I always said that if anybody laid a finger on me, I would walk away
I
immediately.
used to say it as
I
well.
used to say that.
And when I was punched in the face and I had a black eye, I didn't walk away. And when I was dragged across a gravel drive by my hair for 20 meters and scraped all down my back, I didn't walk away. And my question is, I know why I didn't leave, but for so many, they will ask, why didn't you just walk out? And, it's so easy. Why didn't you just walk out?
It's so subtle. It doesn't start with a punch in the face. It doesn't start like that. It starts with little things, little behaviors. It starts in a very subtle way.
It's insidious. And it breaks
Insidious,
you.
that's the way.
It breaks you.
And you build a trauma bond with the person. You're emotionally invested. Speaking from my experience, I wanted him to love me. I needed him to love me. So whenever he used to do something and then he comes and he cries and I'm sorry and I love you, and that was all I wanted to hear, and that was all I was hearing, the I love you.
And not realizing that's the way they control us.
And it's such an emotion of very extreme highs and very extreme lows. So even your brain cells, they don't have the time to adjust.
Yeah.
It's like that's how I describe it. I was an addict to the abuse, and unless you go through it, you won't understand it. You become an addict to the abuse. In the beginning of my relationship with my current partner, I used to call his sister and I used to tell her, he's so boring, we never fight. Because that was all I knew.
Yeah.
And my counselor, she used to tell me, you need to unlearn everything and learn everything from the beginning.
And I think that's the challenge. And this also comes from your family. If you've been brought up where you have been gaslighted, when you've been told what's wrong with you, if you've been told, oh, you're not like us at all, then and you know that's wrong. But when it comes to you again in a different form, in a different part of your life, it is all you know.
It's familiar.
It's familiar.
It's a pattern
So
you
you
understand.
really think
Safe.
that it's your
Yes.
fault, and you feel safe because you really think that is how people live.
Yes. And the violence itself follows a pattern. And it's a
Yeah.
pattern of entrapment because it just goes, it happens all
a
over and
cycle.
over.
Yeah.
So you start with everything being okay, and then there is tension, and you know that you shouldn't bring up bad news because you can feel tension, like it's not the right time. But really, in a healthy relationship, you should be able to talk about anything, anytime. But in a relationship like this, that you shouldn't, you feel like, I won't bring up the electricity bill because now, not something bad that I may have done, just, nothing pleasant.
But it's like everything is your fault. If you get
course,
a high
you
electricity
know.
bill, oh, it's your fault.
Exactly,
Why?
you
Because
know.
you put on the AC. But you were there.
Yeah, yes. So you don't bring it up. And then the tension gets even thicker. And if you are very hyper-vigilant, and this is what makes survivors, victims of violence, exhausted mentally, because you're constantly trying to measure, how is the scene today? How is he today?
Yes.
Yeah. So then you're hyper-vigilant. You're getting tired of being hyper, but you're very careful and walking on eggshells and being careful not to say the wrong thing, not to do the wrong thing, not to ask the wrong thing, keep the kids quiet. Right?
You try to
Something will
prevent
happen. Can you
what
prevent
others
it, though?
do.
But can you prevent it?
No, because anything
it's
will
going to
trigger
happen.
it. It's
going to
already
happen.
there.
And it happens. And then there's an explosion. And then there is whatever
Whatever happens.
And then after that, It depends on what the victim decides, whether she feels, usually we might cry or we might argue, we might fight back. You know, there's something, a resistance that goes on from the victim's side, followed by either blaming or apologies, and then a honeymoon. And why? This is the entrapment, because you're either blamed, so it's your fault, you're the broken one, you're the one that's doing, you know, it's not me, it's obviously you made me behave this way. Or I'm so sorry, it's just I'm so stressed, and, you know, because we have money problems and all that. And then you start to see the man that you fell in love with. You start to see the, you know,
You live for the good
sweet
bit,
guy.
and you know the good bit is coming,
Yes.
so you put up with it.
Yes, and it always comes around.
Yeah,
and that's
for
what
that
entraps you.
moment, for that 5 minutes of
And
glory.
it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and the violence comes quicker. So the cycle goes around quicker and quicker with time.
Well,
and it gets
that's
worse.
what I was going to ask, because, you know, if we sat down at a first date, let's say we go on a first date with your partner, your husband, whoever, and you're in a restaurant and they show their cards and stand up in the middle of dinner and whack you. I mean, nobody would stay for that. Nobody,
course.
nobody would stay at the
They
table.
wait until you're emotionally
But that's like what you
that's
said.
what my question is. My question is to explain to anybody who doesn't understand, and to see the woman who does, to make sure she knows she's seen. How does this develop? How do we go from the first date to finding yourself tied into this emotional cycle? What's the pattern? What's the little bits? What's the little things? How do we go from here to here? First date, you're sitting there having a glass of wine, you're finding yourself in an abuse situation.
I think it's the everyday routine that you are trying to prevent a bad news from reaching him, for example.
But do you remember
But
the
there are
first
red
time?
flags. There are red
There
flags.
are
I don't
always
have-
red flags. I
red
think
flags.
we just
Remember the
don't.
first-
We just don't. If you've passed through a lot of shit, sorry, I said it. If you've passed through a lot of stuff, that part of it will be eradicated. You won't know it. You won't remember it, because when you think of the relationship, and this is for me, when you think of the relationship, it's always the ups and downs, not the proper ups and downs, which is acceptable to a relationship. And this might be jumping the gun a bit, but one of the things is I never know anymore, after all these years, when is the right time to stand up? When is the right time to stop? What is accepted? What is not?
And you know why? Because as women, especially as women, we are taught from a very young age that we need to be quiet, we need to put up with it. We're the glue and the gel of the family.
And the
And that
relationship
we shouldn't
takes
cause trouble. We
a
shouldn't be
relationship takes
troublemakers.
sacrifices,
Of
but what
course.
are the sacrifices?
Exactly. So we're told, shh, you know, why are you causing all this trouble? Why?
Yes.
So we have that. So on one hand, we have the red flags that we do see, but we make excuses for, because the world makes excuses for the perpetrator. The police make excuses for the perpetrator. Court makes excuses. The journalists make excuses. We're taught to make excuses for their behavior.
And it's the trend, isn't it, of the time? Before, it used to be acceptable for a man to keep a partner, to rule over a partner. Now, women are encouraged and expected to be stronger, to be independent. But when it comes to a relationship, the woman is still
have to be
always
submissive.
expected to take second place, whether it's kids, whether it's careers, whether it's who's doing the shopping. And sometimes we take these roles over automatically because we get things done.
Yes.
But I've never heard a man worry how he's going to juggle a career and a family.
Exactly. And that's not a choice he has to make.
And this is being a little general, let's put it this way, because I know fantastic men who love their families and work as hard as the women and take days off to be with the kids, whatever.
course.
But the reality is, if you've got kids and one of them is sick, who's taking a day off? Who's taking a sick day off?
So you're suggesting that accepting domestic violence is a cultural implication, is that we've led culturally to that being something that is not as questioned as often as it. You said something back there, Elaine, that really made me think. You said about the police making excuses. I can remember I had a stalker, someone who was in my village, and I went to the police because this man had tried to run me off the road at one point, chased me for 3.5 kilometres in the dark, and then tried to run me off the road. When I pulled over, I realised who it was, and he tried to smash the car window, and I managed to get away. When I went to the police, they called him. I reported it. They called him, and they called me back and said, listen, we called him. He knew exactly why we called him. He apologised. And this had gone on for 2 years, but his wife is unwell. And so we'd suggest, he won't do it again. Now, thankfully, he's never done it again, because I told them if he ever, and they said, the other thing they said is, listen, you're a foreigner. I really wouldn't push this. I wouldn't push this one. Now, the problem is that it's a staggering statistic that in Malta, 1 in 3 women will experience intimate partner violence. I am horrified by that. There are nearly 250,000 women in Malta, and last year only 2,071 cases of domestic violence were reported. So we're not even talking about intimate violence. Mm-hmm. This statistically is insanely wrong. So why are women not coming forward? We know that it's cultural, but even statistically, there should be more women coming forward. Even if we have cases of women not feeling that they can because of cultural pressures and so on and so forth. But why are there not more women coming forward? Because that statistic, compared with the reality, isn't even in the same ballpark.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of reasons, and there's research on it.
It's not easy to come forward when you love the person.
That's the first point, right?
But even if you do get beyond that, it's not happened to me. I'm going to be very honest about this. But I have female friends who came to ask for assistance. Have you been to the police? Yes. There's been no help. And I'm not putting this on any police, because I know there's some fantastic people in the force there who do their best, honestly. So again, let's not generalize. But these people, I fear, are not being given the training and the tools.
Going back to what Sephora said before we come to, because we've just opened up a massive can of worms. Because you just said there's not the training and the tools. Okay, that's not the police's fault.
Absolutely not.
That's not the police officer who's faced with a rape allegation. If they don't know how to deal with that, that's not necessarily their fault. Okay, Elaine has an opinion on that. Before we come to that, because we've just opened up a massive can of worms, but you said something, Sephora, that just blew my mind, and I think you've hit the nail on the head as a starting point. It's not easy to report your partner. Why?
Because you're in love with your partner.
But is it really love? But is it really love?
From your side, yes.
But how can you love someone? And I'm not putting this to you. I'm putting it to myself.
It's an attachment. It's
an attachment.
But it's
for me, for example, I've been with him since I was 16 years old.
I knew
no other life beyond him. My friends were his friends. My life was built around him. Mm-hmm. His family was my family. So,
which is part of it, isn't
easy.
It? The way
even if you find it in you that you go and report, enough. Am I going to do this to his mother, for example? Those are thoughts that pass through your mind.
Even for your own kids.
And when you have your kids, am I going to do this to my kids?
Is he going to end up in prison because I reported?
When things got so much worse at the end, and I used to go to report. For example, I needed to go to work. Who's gonna keep my son when I'm at work? How am I going to pay the bills without him?
It's a reality.
There are thoughts that pass through your mind, because how am I gonna do it alone? I cannot do it alone. Whenever I used to go and report, and they used to tell me, okay, maybe we will go and talk to him, maybe we will arrest him. If they arrest him, what am I going to do? If I'm at work and he's with our son, what's going to happen to my son while they arrest him? And you're always living with these thoughts. they exhaust you, and then at the end of the road, you're not thinking well anymore. Your mind
Not
is
seeing things.
These are all barriers. In 2018, there was research by Naudi, Clark, and Holger Suarez. They asked what are the barriers to help seeking among women in Malta. And they found 9. I don't think I can remember all of them, but this is one of them.
Financial issue.
The financial, the problems with housing. So the lack of support from the state would include the police and how they respond to someone who is seeking help, perhaps response from or fear around trying to get help from social workers as well, because you've been told that, oh, go to the social worker and they'll take your kids. So a lot of lies and gaslighting and so on that you've been through keeps you away from the lack of self-confidence. The violence itself causes that lack of self-confidence and self-esteem. Who, they're not going to believe me, you know? Today, the violence itself can keep, so if there's control and coercive control, you're probably out of work, not allowed to study, don't have money. What are your chances of leaving, where you have a ceiling and going into a shelter? Okay, that's not forever. And then what? Can you afford the rent? Can I afford on government assistance,
Yeah.
which is around 500 euros a month? Have you seen the rents?
Oh, yes.
When
lived
I
them.
saw the property market exploding in 2017, I just felt so bad for women who need to escape, because I'm like, this is going to be a huge, huge barrier. So there are barriers other than.
I never would have thought of that about the property market.
Yeah,
course.
you can't afford. If that's something else, unless you have financial, and this is something I truly believe in, unless you have financial independence, you can't have a healthy relationship. Even if there's no abuse or violence involved, because there's a sense of dependence. That's how it works with me anyway.
Because there's a power imbalance.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
That's it.
So what about people who can't afford to be without their partner? I'm not
You have to stay
expecting the
there.
state, and any country to always step in, because then there could be abuse of a different manner. We know it happens. But in reality, I can't believe, again, in this day and age, we're still living the battles of 20 years ago. It's just the same, isn't it?
Can I ask you something, Rachel? Because when Sephora said about love, one of the reasons you wouldn't go and report your partner is because you loved them. You jumped in and you said, well, is it love? But you have first-hand experience of this, and I'm not necessarily asking for personal details, but how long were you living with that love or that situation before you made a move?
There wasn't any love at all.
But how long were you there?
4 years.
Okay.
3 to 4 years in total. And
why didn't you do anything?
because it brought back memories of what my family used to tell me. That there was something wrong with me. I used to hear it daily, we don't want you. You're not like us. So
could I ask you, and I'm going to ask I'm going to ask all 3 of you ladies, because we're all talking about this situation. What was the catalyst that made you say, I'm getting out? I'm going to ask you, and you don't have to be graphic, but how bad did it get? And what was the catalyst that said, I'm getting out? Because you mentioned that you were told that you had to perform and you said this to me on the phone, and my heart broke. And you've just mentioned it now, that on a Saturday morning, you knew that you would have to be expected, you were expected to perform on a Saturday night, and that was violent. You had mentioned the violence involved in that. What was the catalyst? What was the thing that said, okay, I can't do this anymore?
my daughter, when not sexually at all, but when it was starting on her, that was the day I walked. I said, this is enough. No more.
This comes back to what Elaine just said about us women. We'll put up with it when it's us.
And it's exactly the same for me. It's exactly the same reason. We were just talking about that before the show. It was when he raised his hand on my daughter, and I was like, okay, so it's
That's
going
it.
there now. Okay, then then that crosses the line. That crosses the line, you know. But even though I had always said I would never let a man do that to me, I would never let a man do that to me. But that really and truly crossed the line, because then I felt my role was different. Now my role is protector. Before, my role was gel of the family. So now my role is protector.
Do you mind me asking, and feel free to answer or not answer, but how bad did it get before that?
I was threatened with a metal bar. He came towards me to beat me with it. He didn't actually. I was screaming at the top of my lungs at 1 o'clock in the morning. None of my neighbors called the police, may I add. But it was then that I realized how close I came to being killed, really, even though he'd never lifted a hand on me before. And I want to add to this, because this is the great moment to bring this up. We mustn't think that the violence is the indicator for high risk for lethal violence. It's not how violent someone is, it is how controlling someone is. It's the control that is the risk indicator for lethal violence. So you could be, you know, you could get the worst kind of violence.
Could be just the first time, and that would be the last as
That
well.
would be the last. Exactly, without having had any experience of physical violence before. So the idea, this is why I hate using the word abuse, because control is violent. It's violent.
Dercos, recommended by dermatologists. Anti-hair loss protocol. A concentration of aminexil in a scalp treatment to reduce hair loss by 29%. And in a stimulating shampoo to boost volume by 48%. A potent synergy for hair 3 times stronger. Anti-hair loss protocol. By Dercos, the dermatological scalp and hair expert.
Yeah. Sephora, if you don't mind me asking, how bad did it get, and what was the catalyst? What made you choose to take that leap?
It was very bad at the end, very, very bad. I had 5 stitches in my head. The first time I went to the shelter, I was sleeping at 3 a.m. and I felt the bed shaking, and he started hitting me while I was sleeping. So we didn't even have an argument. I was sleeping. So it was that bad. Yes, it was very bad at the end. And I felt it coming. I felt the need that I needed to do something about it. And then once as well, my son came and he told him, why are you hitting mom? It was my birthday. And he hit me in my back. And told him, why are you hitting mommy? It's her birthday. And I couldn't move. And because I said, this 6-year-old boy who has autism has more sense than I do. He's telling him, why are you hitting mommy? It's her birthday. So he knows it's not normal. Why am I thinking it's normal? I have to do something about it.
There's even something else with that. He was so used to see you being hit
Of
that he thought you
course.
should have a day off because it was your birthday.
Of course. It was normal for him. For him, it was our lifestyle.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I mean, my heart is just breaking for us ladies sitting at the table, but anybody that goes through this. But can I ask a question before we go on to how to get out of this? What were the other elements, apart from the violence, physical, that were in your situation? You mentioned financial control. We mentioned, you alluded to, and it was certainly part of a situation that I had been involved in, that there was another person, there was a mistress involved, that there was infidelity that was involved. And that's quite often because the type of people that we're talking about that are capable of being perpetrators of domestic abuse, violence, intimate partner violence, certainly do not have the self-control to stop themselves, or the care or the love to stop themselves from having another person involved in the relationship. We also talked about the humiliation. Oh my good Lord above, the humiliation. Really? You really think that you're capable of that? Is there anything else that springs to mind that you can think of before we turn to the positive that would describe your situation so that anybody who's seeing this can say, I recognize that?
In my case, I think he used to think so highly of himself and he used to belittle me so much that I had no confidence, no self-love whatsoever. Even with others, even outside our home, if someone tells me something, I used to say, no, I'm in the wrong. It's me. I'm wrong. Because it was always here in my head. And that's when social media came in my life, because I have built another world where he was not involved. And I found another Sephora in there. I was someone else. And I longed for that feeling, the feeling I felt when I was speaking to others on social media and interacting and making new friends. I said, this is the life I want, not this.
So this was actually part of your recovery. This was part of your
Yes, of
decision to get
course, I
out, because
wouldn't-
you saw that people appreciated
I thought it
you.
was normal, the life I used to live. I thought it was I had no friends apart from his friends, so I couldn't speak badly about him. But when I made new friends through social media, and I used to go out for coffee in the morning, and I used to speak to one particular friend, Ellison, and she used to tell me, it's not normal, the way your relationship is not normal. And I used to tell her, what do you mean? It's not normal. No, it's not normal. If something bad happens to you, you should feel comfortable enough. You should find support and solace in him, not the other way around. And something, it's like it was a big wake-up call. It was a big wake-up call, because then the doors started to open and I was seeing the way I was supposed to be living. This is not how things should be.
Yeah, that normal comes back to what you were saying, Rachel, that you had been conditioned by family to expect this behaviour.
Yeah.
But what else was involved for you apart from obviously there was aggression involved and violence? What else was there?
I was told on a daily basis that no one would ever want me because I was too ugly, because I was too stupid. And the relationship was happening because he felt sorry for me. And, I'm not usually lost for words as well, And many years on, it's still horrifying. After having climbed out of one hole,
Yeah.
at having,
Yeah.
And every time I wanted to leave, I was threatened. Every time. I tried to leave. Yeah.
But threatened how?
If you break up, I'll kill you. And I'll kill myself.
It's very normal.
And if I had someone today, if I were in a relationship today with someone saying that, I would say it's up to you. I'm leaving. I'd like to think I do that, to be honest. But it has made subsequent relationships difficult. And I have to put it there, because we're just saying the bad bits. There are some fantastic men out there who really love and really know how to love and get badly treated by women.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
So-
This is not.
You know?
This is not bashing men.
No,
This is
because,
bashing bad men.
Yes. And I
It's the manipulation, I think. It's the manipulation that they manipulate you into thinking that your actions will have a
consequences.
catastrophic effect on the life and on your life, on their life, and on the life of your family.
The most chilling thing I heard when we finally did what we have to do was, I will always control you. By that time, I was strong enough. I said, we'll see about it. But that control remained up to a certain extent because of my daughter.
Yes. The minute you said
Because,
it, you reminded me.
because law doesn't help you. Law is written down. Law is important. I love the law. I'm studying law. But in reality, I'll just give a quick aside. There are two trains of thought with law: legal positivism and natural law. And legal positivism believes that the law is right because it is a law. Natural law means you do what is right, even if it is not the law or it goes against the law. The Greeks believed in it a lot. They had a Greek tragedy. Too long to stay about to talk about it, but when you do what's right, it's not necessarily according to law. But you can only get help legally by what the law gives you.
And the law doesn't help.
Which
And
goes
the law
back to, I was going to say,
doesn't
which goes
help.
back to what Elaine was saying before.
No, it doesn't help. I'll give you an example of this. So when I left my ex-husband, I escaped my home and went into a shelter, right?
Okay.
Which clearly signifies that I was at risk. And when I went to court, the judge or the magistrate decreed that I should take the children back to the home where I had escaped from and stay with them myself, to accompany the kids myself while he had his access. Because his access to the children trumped my safety. Because that's the law.
And the thing is this, while I understand that the magistrate cannot go what is against the law, we have a parliament, I think there are 75 MPs, right? There are women there, and there are women who do a fantastic job, any side of any party, so let's not get into that. And some of them have experienced it themselves. So, and I wrote this a little while ago and on social media. Enough with the public inquiries. We've had the public inquiries. We know what's wrong.
I'm gonna take this away from politics for a second, because I read or I heard something online. We're going to talk about in a minute about what we as women, if you're in that situation, what you can do and how you can start leading your way out of this situation. But I want to address something, because we've said that there is a system that is failing. It has failed. There is good that is done, because else we wouldn't be sitting at this table.
Absolutely.
But there is a system that is not adequate. Let's not use the word failing, but it's not adequate. But we as friends, family, and even people around, work colleagues, we do have the ability to do something. We do have the ability. This right here, we have the ability to make change. And I heard a talk recently by a man in the UK talking about rape. And he's a comedian, but he was very passionately talking about this. And he said that not being an abuser, and he's talking to men in the room, is not enough. He said there are monsters amongst us and they look like us. And it's not enough to say, I'm not part of the problem, therefore I must be part of the solution. When we do nothing, we might not as well be there. Now, he was specifically addressing other men, but I think the same applies for us. When we see something and we do nothing, we are part of the problem. We might as well not be there. And I think if there's if there's a framework that isn't adequate enough, my question is, what do we do? What are we looking for? If there's 1 in 3 women in Malta who are being affected by domestic violence or intimate partner violence, what are we looking for, and what can we do as friends, family, work colleagues, neighbours? You said, Elaine, that you were screaming and not one of your neighbours
Unbelievable.
called the police. I've been in that situation, and I'm pretty sure, Sephora, people around you that live near you must have known something was happening.
I had support from my neighbors, because
That is amazing.
yes, because they knew they used to hear him. They were fed up with him themselves. So, but not everyone has the courage to call the police. Maybe we have a culture of, I don't want to interfere in such
I don't
stuff.
want to get involved.
The trouble they may get into with the perpetrator himself, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah, but we know, with all due respect, and I hate swearing, but that's bullshit. Because women are dying, and 1 in 3 women are affected by this.
But there are risks. There are risks. There have been people who have helped the victim. There have been family members of the victim. Some years ago, her sister was beaten with a plank. Another one, her father, was killed by the perpetrator. So there are risks.
Okay.
I think what the mistake we make is to think that the intervention should come when there is violence. The intervention has to start way before.
Yeah.
Way before. When we have our own young boys who are talking in a certain way, who are behaving in a certain way, who are even... And that's why that comedian addressed men, because men have such an important role.
Yeah.
They are in the spaces where men are. They are in the locker rooms. They are in the bars and the casini.
The boy talk.
Yes, the locker room talk. We need to stop it there. Hey, that's not cool. Because saying, hey, that's not cool, isn't going to get you knifed, hopefully. But, it's intervening way, way before it gets to the point where someone is taking someone else's life. And it goes down, even the employers. What can an employer do? How can an employer support a woman they know is within their workforce and going through this? How can they do something about a perpetrator who's among their workforce? Yeah. Football clubs, sports clubs. Why do we make excuses for perpetrators? Shouldn't we start there? Shouldn't we start with the journalist and the way they frame it? Oh, because he was a hardworking man, and I don't care. He was horrible. He was nasty. He's
a
dangerous.
monster.
I
monster.
think, if I may interject here, I think that when it comes to journalism, or what I've seen so far, basically bits and pieces here and there, they do give very often a fair picture, but the reality is that they give a fair picture after we've got a victim.
Not always.
Because sometimes even on Facebook, on the news, for example, the title, a man is given 6 months probation, blah, 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 because he hit his wife after he caught her texting someone else.
Exactly.
For example.
Exactly. There's no reason.
There's
no
like it's
justification.
excused because
She provoked
okay,
him.
it's bad, but
And sometimes they make fun of, like, for example, there had been a case of a sexual assault by the husband on the wife, and they made fun of the way it happened because it was using, I can't remember, but, like he might have stopped something like a chocolate or something, whatever. It was made fun of because it was funny, but it's not funny. Even the last event we've had, the last femicide we've had, the victim blaming it's disgusting. It's disgusting how we frame, and so we have journalists and editors, because sometimes it's not the journalist, sometimes it's the editor who changes the title.
Clickbait, isn't it?
This is really important, and there are guidelines which have been issued. So my frustration and anger comes because there is a lot of work that has been done. There are a lot of guidelines. There have been a lot of meetings. There have been, myself working within NGOs, I have wasted so much time attending meetings, talking about what needs to change. And so many others have too. Don't do this on my own. But why does nothing change? It's because it's not a sexy thing. It's not a hot topic. It's a hot topic for now because we've had an event, but it's going to die. And then we'll wait for the next femicide, and then we'll be having this discussion again. But it doesn't, it's not a money-making thing, it's not a vote thing, it's not important. And I'm sad to say, like recently in a discussion among a network, I feel like I am alive only because my ex decided not to kill me. Not because I feel protected by the state, not because I felt protected by my neighbors, because my neighbors can't really protect me anyway. The police would have come and said...
Paċenzja.
Going back to the neighbor subject that we were talking about, because I wanted to mention this, sometimes it's good to understand the psychological effect the perpetrator has on the victim. Because even on news, we see it, we see it often, that the victim went to court and she forgave the perpetrator.
But how... It's not about how can you forgive. Why is that allowed?
And you know what? It doesn't have to be. Because legally, the magistrate can put that aside and carry on going on with the case because a crime has been committed.
I can understand
But we
forgiving
have
to
to
get it over
we
and
have
done
to
with.
understand.
We shouldn't put the onus on the victim. It shouldn't depend on the victim to...
Go through
because
with it.
They're not the ones pressing charges anyway. It's the police which are pressing charges.
Because the thing is that sometimes, for example, even my family, I used to call, I'm leaving him, that's it. And I'll be with him in 2 hours or 3 hours after that. So they gave up on me. They didn't believe that I was going to leave him. The first time I went to the shelter, I called my mother from the depot at 4 a.m. I told her, listen, he started beating me up. I was sleeping. She said, I'll come pick up your son. And that's it. She came, she took my son.
And what about you?
And I went to the shelter. Why? But you have to understand why. Because I've been telling them for years, I'm gonna leave him, I'm gonna leave him, I'm gonna leave him. And then, when they are or angry with him, or they call him, I make up with him. So they were fed up of me. And now I do understand why. But people out there need to understand the cycle, the psychological effect, how little you think of yourself. You have no self-confidence.
I think it's worth saying as well that in that situation, you didn't just walk away and then sat there and went, oh, forgive him. He must have been contacting you. He must have been intimidating you and saying, listen, let's get back together. Listen, you don't want to do this. Listen, I'm the only person
the
for you.
first time.
The same way that
about
in
the
Rachel's
children.
situation.
Think about the children.
children. But in Rachel's situation, you're not worth it anywhere else. It's not Sephora that's making this decision that you go back to him and forgive him.
It's all part of it.
You are, Ta.
You are,
You
but
are.
you're not doing it in isolation.
You know what you're doing in a way, but your brain is so foggy that my counselors used to tell me when you're living the abuse, it's like you're looking at a picture like this, very close to your eyes. But when you're moving it away,
You see it differently.
now you're seeing the whole picture.
Yeah.
And the farther I moved from the situation, that's why I think there is a study that shows that victims don't leave on their first.
Yeah.
They try 4 or 5 times to leave.
7 to 9
7 to
times.
9.
7 to 9 times?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of danger that's involved in that, because if
course,
you
'cause it
keep
gets
leaving.
worse.
Mela.
Gets
So
worse.
I'm going to come back to something that you said there, Elaine. You said, as I had said, I read out that quote from this British comedian, that the people around, there are monsters among us, and there are people who see it or hear it. And for men, because we know men listen, and I hope they would take this on board, that they have a role to play in making this stop.
Yes.
So calling out men, you have a role. If you are not part of preventing it, you are part of enabling it. And that is black and white. So in any domestic abuse situation, domestic violence, whatever, if you even have an inkling as men, please step up. We know it's hard, but you're much less likely to get backlash or to be beaten up for saying something, particularly if it's in the locker room or you're in the pub. Actually, that's not cool. That's all you have to say. That's not cool. And it gets someone to rethinking, actually, you're not cool. And maybe I should rethink my thing.
And you can't be part of our group.
Yeah.
We don't want
Absolutely.
people like that in our group.
And it needs to happen. It needs to happen soon. And it'd be great if there was a whole national campaign about that, because that would be a really great place to start. But for us women, and I'm asking from you guys from personal experience and expertise, how do we see someone we love or care about in a violent situation? How do we sense it, and what do we do? Even if we don't want to go and report to the police, is there anything we can do? Because, Sephora, you said your family got fed up with it. And that's understandable because they've heard it over and over again, but there must be something that we can do.
A close friend of mine, I mentioned her already, Alison, she was great support for me. And I think the thing she did that helped me a lot was she used to tell me, Isma, whether you decide to stay or leave, I love you, I'm here for you, and I will help you. So if I call her at 9 in the morning, that's sick, I'm leaving, blah, blah, blah. Okay, how can I help? If I call her at noon, no, I'm gonna stay. He said, sorry, we're gonna work things out. Okay, is there anything I can do to help? And that was something that it was everything for me. It was the support I needed.
That's the way you do it. That's the way you do it. It is for any family, for any friends who know someone who's going through it, they need to understand that that person who's going through it needs unconditional support, not only support if you're leaving. And really important to understand that risks are elevated at the time of leaving. If we look at femicides that have happened in Malta, most of them are around the time that someone has left or someone
After
is
the
in,
breakup.
After the breakup. So it's really risky. We cannot push someone to leave. It's really important that we're there for them no matter what. We're there for them if they decide to go back. We're there for them the next time they decide to leave. It's exhausting. It's being empathic and supportive, and then it almost feels like you're being disloyal to the family by going back to him. It feels like that to them, maybe even to you. But the family, the friends need to understand that this is not easy. You cannot just up and leave. It is risky. And leaving involves a very careful planning. It is not, sometimes you really need to just run out and escape a situation, but most times the more safer way to do it is to have a safety plan, is to speak to a professional who understands and knows what they're doing. In this case, this would be the domestic violence unit at Apoch in Guardamanja. And they would sit down with someone who's going through this and go through everything, and they would have a safety plan. And safety plan could be, don't argue in the kitchen, because there are knives in the kitchen. Don't argue
wow, I never thought of that.
with your door, with your back, to a corner. Make sure the door is behind
You've got an
you.
escape route.
Yes, there are things like this.
Passports
Make sure
should
you
be
have
hidden.
all
Important
documents with someone safe, someone you trust.
Even maybe cash.
I had
jewelry,
keys hidden under the stairs of the common areas because
So
he
you could
always
grab
used to take
them.
the keys from me. So I had a copy and I hid it under the stairs. So
If someone can plan, they should plan. Sometimes you can't plan. Sometimes you're being strangled in the middle of the night and you just have to escape, But if you can plan, you should plan.
We're going to come to, I'm sorry, I'm just sitting there shocked. We're going to come to that of what you, in that situation, I want more of that information for what you ladies did and what you can recommend for a woman who finds herself in that situation to do. But as a friend and as a support, it's unconditional love. It's unconditional. And I think one of the things that come to you in a second, Rachel, because you jumped on that, but I think it's really worth saying that none of us expect to find ourselves in a domestic violence situation. We don't walk into it. It happens. It's an evolving situation. It has huge psychological, emotional implications. And I just want to say, we can never judge someone who's in that situation. None of us are above finding ourselves. It's nothing to do with intellect. It's nothing to do with social status. We know billionaires and pop stars and Hollywood stars that have found themselves in these situations. It's nothing to do with that. It's not a class issue. It's not a social status issue. It can happen to anyone, and none of us have any right to judge a woman who finds herself in that situation. Coming to you, Rachel, I'm sorry, I'm quite emphatic about that. Coming to you, you jumped in.
And I totally agree with what you, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. And I get the 100% unconditional support. But I'd ask you as a professional, and I'd ask you because you had that support with Alison. Well done, Alison. I'd have loved to have a couple of you around as well. Would you not insist that something should be done rather than? I mean, it could be a character thing. If I'd like to think that if I were in the situation of helping someone, I'd definitely be there, whatever the situation is or whatever the decision is, rather. But I would still continue to insist that something should be done.
It's touchy because you want that person to make the decision for themselves. Otherwise, it's like, see, I followed your advice and look what happened to me. They need to own their decision, and it's really important they take responsibility for it. Once I had a discussion with a colleague of mine who's a social worker, and if she's watching, I'm sure she knows I'm talking about her. We had a little bit of not an argument, but we disagreed on responsibility. And I was like, how dare you? Like, what do you mean a victim should take responsibility of their actions? And coming back to a bit to what you said, like you knew what you were doing, you knew when you were going back. I think the difference is we need to take responsibility for our part in it, for our part where we decide to put up with this and to lay our boundaries down. And I have 2 girls, and I wouldn't want them to go through this. And a part of how I prepare them for life, because it can happen to anyone, is to make sure that they're comfortable with having boundaries and to sticking to them. This is my standard. If anyone makes me push that, that's a red flag, a screaming red flag. Are you trying to make me change my boundaries? Are you disrespecting my boundaries? Then that's a huge red flag. And I think that's the point where we should light that alarm, But coming back to the support, it has to be unconditional. And absolutely. The way you would help someone, not by telling them what to do, but to say, so what are your boundaries? What are your values? Have the discussion, let them discover who they were, because you may both agree with me, but during my relationship, I lost myself.
Of course.
I lost who I was. I rediscovered myself when I had distance, because you see the whole picture.
I
You
didn't
find
know
yourself again.
what I liked and what I didn't.
Yes.
I had to discover. I didn't know who I was.
Yeah, you lose your identity.
I didn't know. I was a mother. I identified myself as the mother of Diego. That's it. There was no Sephora in the vicinity. I was nowhere to be found. And then thanks to therapy. Therapy did the
so
magic.
important. Therapy is so important.
This cool, because I think this is where we're going to start talking about what you can do as a person who has experienced domestic violence and the aftermath and how you pick yourself up again. I just want to say one thing, because you said about this unconditional. You know, I said to a friend just a couple of years ago, I said, I know what you're going through. I can't help you because I've offered you, it has to be your decision. But when you want to, if you want to, my door is open, come and stay.
Exactly.
And you can stay for a night, you can stay for 2 nights, you can stay for however long you want. As it was, she stayed for 6 months. But that situation ended. And I can really tell you that that was healing for me because of my own experience, because I also deeply, deeply wish someone had said that to me when I was in that situation. And I didn't. And unfortunately, I had to sort of dig my own way out of my own situation. But I wish I'd had that sort of somewhere to run away. And I think we can all be that. Even if you don't have a spare bed, you can say, I have a door, I have a coffee. When you want to come, just come. And no judgment. And I think that's really important, is the no judgment. I think it's worth us all remembering as human beings. I'll say it again. We have no right to judge anyone. We are never, ever beyond ever going to a dark place. Let's talk about, so we've looked at what we can do. I just want to ask, actually, before we move on from that, I want to ask, and maybe Elaine or any of you, to be honest with you, if you are a friend, what are you looking for? What is an indicator that someone you care about or a family member is going through that situation?
They become less. So if someone liked a sport, they stop doing it.
Yeah.
If someone enjoyed listening to music, they stop doing it. If they used to go out with you as a friend or as a sister, or if they came to family meals and they stop doing it, that's a red flag. They become less.
Wow. Because I'm hearing Rachel like, yep, and Sephora's like nodding, and that echoes exactly what you just said. You didn't have yourself.
No, my social life was non-existent. I didn't have a social life. Socially, I was dead.
Wow. So we should be looking for people that we care about around us who are withdrawing and becoming less.
Their light dims.
And even if they are there, they've changed.
And they're like dims. I really like what you said just then.
Yeah.
I think that's something we can all relate to, that light dims.
Mm-hmm.
That is so powerful. Oh, my heart is really, really breaking right now. Let's move on to, if you are in that situation, what moves, what can we start doing? I mean, we're going to supply numbers and contacts and all of the details for everybody that wants to help or is in that situation, wants to find a way out. But I want to make this very, very personal. What can you do? What did you do? What are the first moves? How can you take that first step? You've mentioned that strategy. You shocked Rachel and I when you talked about the safety strategy. I mean, the safety plan, I've never heard that before.
I have to be honest, I love it. So it makes me feel even safe now. I have no issues whatsoever when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. There are even apps you can download. Not in Malta, but there's an app is an app, so you can download
it from
and apply
anywhere.
it to yourself. But there are apps one can read about safety planning. I still recommend that they approach a professional to help them, because that professional would do a risk assessment.
A professional from, you mentioned before, a POCH.
From domestic violence, which means that they don't have to, if you have somebody who's going through this, is not ready to report, because when you report, the perpetrator will know, they will call him up, it's almost like an explosion that you're inviting. So a lot of women, a lot of victims of violence are not prepared for that. And so if you're not prepared to report yet, you still go to a social worker. No police report will be made, and they will help that person to plan their escape, if you will. Or even if they choose not to leave, they'll plan that they're safer there.
Yep.
That's the first thing, I think, really important. And then part of that planning is, like we've mentioned, the documents, sentimental things, make copies of things which are
Notes
important.
in the car.
Having an emergency bag.
You had clothes in the
leaving
car.
them with family or friends. So that's another way family and friends can help.
Medication, if, for
If
example,
there's
your kids
medication.
take
That
medication.
extra. And if it's a long-term plan, think about getting a job if you don't work, saving up money, hiding the money if there is, because there probably is financial abuse.
Yeah.
So having friends keep that money. I had a bank account on my mother, for example, my mother's name. So I could put money in there from my job because he was already planning on how to spend my salary. So there are long-term plan. There's a long-term plan that one can, think about. But I think it starts there.
You were about to say there, you're talking about clothing and you're talking about, this is obviously part of what you were doing.
You have to have an emergency, like she said. My social worker, she guided me what I have to do: passports, ID cards, a uniform for my son. I had everything in the car. And the hidden car key, because the first thing he was to snatch from my hands were the keys. So I stay inside.
Jeez.
I've had my car tampered with as well. So, for example, something that an employer can help with if they have a garage. So I worked in a place that had a garage for the directors. And when I spoke to my supervisor about what I was going through, actually she noticed, and funny enough, she was foreign, so she must have had training. She came up to me and said to me, "Is everything okay at home?" And this is something really, really important. When we notice family, the light is dimming, whatever, that's the question you ask. Is everything okay? Is everything okay at home? Know that you can come to me. I'm a safe person, to talk to. So my supervisor says, "Is everything okay at home?" And I says, "No, actually." And I told her that he had tampered with my car because I told him I was going to speak to a lawyer. And I found where he had tampered with the car and fixed it. But I was afraid that he'd do that again or tamper with the brakes. So when I went to work with my car, my bosses allowed me to park my car in the garage with the directors' cars, which is something really small that they could do, but that really...
It made you feel safe.
Of
didn't
course.
it? For a certain
course.
period of time, you could remove that thought,
Of
which
course.
allows you to concentrate on other stuff. And I'm sorry if I'm jumping in here, but just like there's first aid training in companies, there should be this sort of training as well. Many companies, include the one I work with, which are fantastic in taking care of their employees, offer us time for our mental health. They're always there to listen, and it's an amazing company. Honestly, I'm not plugging the company, but I understand what a difference it makes into our lives. But I think what you're saying here should be part and parcel
Yes.
of training in an HR department.
If it affects 1 in 3 women, we should definitely know an awful
And
lot
we
more.
provide it.
There you go. That's a plug.
That's
I
a
can live
plug.
with. I'm happy with that. I can take that plug.
We provide it.
Ladies, we've talked about, and I'm so grateful that you've shared your journeys, and I'm so grateful that this advice that you've given is really blown me away. It's actually something I'd never ever thought about, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. My last question, we've talked about what to look for in people around us. We've talked about how to be a good friend to someone who's going through that situation. We've talked about what domestic violence looks like, and we've talked about how we ourselves can start working our way out of it and the reality of that. We've talked about the fact that there is a system, but maybe the system isn't doing enough. We've talked about, if you are men, what you men should be doing to support your women. That's your sister, your aunt, your friend, your neighbor. That's what men can do to support women all over Malta who might find themselves in this situation. 1 in 3 women are going through this or will go through this. My final question to each of you is, what does life after domestic violence look like, and how do you get there? Because you beautiful women have obviously made it to the other side. I'm going to start with you, Sephora. What was the journey, and what does life look like on the other side?
So first and foremost, I think the first step is self-love, and you can reach that self-love through therapy. You have to go through therapy to learn who you are, what you want from your life, And then you can start loving yourself. Because when you asked us what was the last straw, we all mentioned our children. But why shouldn't we do it for ourselves? Aren't we worthy enough to do it for ourselves? We have to do it for us. It's good we do it for our children, yes, but you have, what if I don't have any kids? Shall I stay there? You have to love yourself enough, and it's only then that you say, I don't deserve this life, I have to do something about it, and I won't stop until I manage. And when you manage to get out of it, it's a whole other world. I don't have words to describe. I don't want to sound as if I'm exaggerating, but the peace I have now, the comfort I have in my own home. I open the door and I say, I'm home. I don't say, oh no. I don't know what's gonna happen today. I say, oh, at last, I'm home. And you feel safe. You're sleeping with someone, even if you're not in a relationship. But presently, when I go to bed, I feel safe in the hands of someone that really loves me and loves me for who I am, someone that doesn't try to change who I am and that accepts me with all my past, and that's something priceless.
Rachel, what does that journey look like, and is there life after domestic violence?
I'm still struggling, but I won't put it on mainly on the relationship. It's what I had before the relationship, Tom. So many years later, I'm still in therapy, and thank God, because you start to realize that you're not what other people tell you what you are. And it took many, many years, but I would say at the beginning of my 50s, I started to lead the life I wanted to. Not entirely, because there are things that have to be done. But I wanted to study law when I was 16. I had to leave home. It was not on going to university and being able to work. So I thought I gave that up. But I'm studying law now.
I think it's worth saying, it just occurred to me, if the description of domestic violence is, as Elaine had said, and that is violence in the home, it's not limited to partner.
Of course not.
You've had domestic violence your entire life.
After my father died, yes. He was the person who protected me. He died when I was 6. And I was brought from the UK to here, to a country which I couldn't understand the language. It was totally different. And that was it. So I have to say that I am really very lucky not to have to go on to the other side, whatever that other side may be. It's people say because it's you, because you're strong. But strong people fall the hardest.
And strong people are strong for a reason.
Yeah.
There's always a reason.
So whatever it is, you can always get out of it. And as you say, you have to choose to get out of it. And if I can use this moment, if anyone I know has an issue, needs somewhere to crash, needs something to eat, my door has always been open. No questions asked. It's always the same. And my partner, who at times puts up with me because he knows that some things are a struggle. So I'm saying this without putting myself down, without belittling me. You use that word and I love it. He's totally on board with it too. There's always a safe place for whoever who needs it. Like this was.
Elaine, the final word is to you.
My journey. I'm going to drink some wine.
Just to make it easier.
Because I wasn't allowed to drink wine in my marriage. So.
Oh, wow.
Cheers.
There's and it's fine wine. I like that. I really like that.
That's part of the journey. You may I had to rediscover myself. I had to find out who I was again. And doing that at the age of, I was 28, 29 at the time, even though it had only been like an 8-year relationship, you change in 8 years. And I found myself starting off like 8, but with 2 kids and now on my own, and all the fear that comes with that. And you mentioned earlier, you really can't, you get out of it and you can't believe that you're actually out of it. Like, for that reality to hit you, it took me 4 years to stop looking over my shoulder. So the journey, you don't leave and then suddenly everything is fine. Violence changes. There is violence when you're in the relationship, and then there's violence when you leave it. There's still violence. There is still the manipulation. There is still the financial abuse when child maintenance is not paid, when there is bickering over access, when there is frivolous court cases, reports and so on. The violence changes. It doesn't really stop. So you really have to be strong. And sometimes people would tell me, wow, you're so strong, I'm like, I don't even think about it or about myself being strong. You just are, because you have to be. You have to be. And it just becomes who you are, right? It just becomes who you are. And then you chase your dreams. And I went to university as an adult, and you just chase and you chase them hard. And you build boundaries because you go to therapy. And first time I went to therapy, I was offered therapy when I was staying in a shelter. I was like, I'm not crazy. I don't need therapy. I'm not crazy. But she says, listen, just try it. It's free. Just give it a go. And I did. And it felt like I was given a map to a maze. I felt like I was in a maze, and that this therapist was helping me navigate my way through myself and my mind and everything that was happening to me and all the reasons why I behaved in certain ways. And therapy, go to therapy. You need therapy. Everybody needs therapy.
It should be even if there are no such issues in your life, it should be, I won't say mandatory, but it should be as common
Everyone
as
should
going
go
to
to
school
therapy.
or going to a doctor because you've got a headache.
And it's so important because you need to learn to trust again. You need to learn to trust. You need to learn that not every man is like that. You need to learn to love. You need to learn to find your way and to have boundaries and to be careful and to love yourself and know this is me and this is what I'll put up with, really, and I'll stick to that. And because you have self-love, you stick to your boundaries. Because if you can get over, if you can process and heal from the trauma of childhood, where if you're naughty, I won't love you, right? So if you can heal from that, then it's okay to be naughty. It's okay to cause trouble by being, I'm not putting up with that.
And today,
that's not okay
we
with
need
me.
to be troublemakers in this society.
Yes, be troublemakers.
Elaine, coming to you, you obviously are a troublemaker.
Aren't we all now?
But I want to just ask you, because you have more authority on this than anybody else because of what you do. There is life after domestic violence.
Absolutely.
You've seen it, you've lived it.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad, and I also just want to say that it doesn't matter who you are. We have a system that hasn't yet come up to scratch in protecting women. 1 in 3 women are affected by domestic violence. And I'm really glad that we've tackled the fact that every single person in Malta has the ability to contribute to bringing down those statistics. Everybody can do something. Everybody can make change for this horrific and abhorrent situation. I'm just so glad, I'm so proud, and I'm so grateful that you ladies have sat around this table, blown this topic apart. And I want to say thank you very much indeed, and cheers to you, absolute wonderful troublemakers.
May we continue to do so.
Oh, I nearly bawled my eyes out. Thank you so much. Now I can cry.